has the broadcast landscape changed over the past 5 years? And we're thinking the capacity of pre-COVID, what happened during COVID, and what has happened since COVID.
What's happening now is very similar to what's been happening in things like the music world, where it's easier to, once upon a time, it was really hard to get your foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Now it's much easier to get your foot in the door, but there's a million other people in the room. Mm-hmm. So with bands trying to make it big now, if you want to record and put something out there, it is easier than ever before. But trying to distinguish yourself from all the other people who have the same opportunity is more difficult. That's what's happening in sports commentary at the moment. There are a lot of opportunities for amateur callers to get in there and learn and call good level sport. But at this stage, we don't know how many of us will be able to make it to professional level or how many jobs there are going to be. Was lucky enough to speak with one of the people I really look up to, Jason Bennett, a little while ago. He is not a Channel 7 employee. He's a freelancer. The only two commentators that Channel 7 employ for Aussie Rules seem to be Brian Taylor and James Brayshaw. Yep. So they're contracted, well, they're direct employees. Everyone else you hear is, okay, we want you for this long, sign here, yep. We're away. When you listen to Aussie Rules on the ABC in Queensland, Quentin Hull and Zane Bojack, they're paid employees of the ABC. People like Michael Price, they're freelancers. They just come in when they're asked to. And so as a result, we've probably got more people doing sports commentary than ever before in Australia. And a lot of us have stars in our eyes, let's face it. We'd love to be able to do this instead of the crappy little desk jobs that we all get. But we're not getting a lot of direction at the moment. We don't really know how to turn the hobby into a career, and we also don't know how to get good enough to justify turning the hobby into a career. And so I think there's now, whereas once upon a time, as I said way back at the beginning of this, a lot of people were keeping their cards close to their chest and still are in terms of their commentary skills. I think because there's a lot of directionless people like us out there now, the time has come to say, okay, well, if you're a really good amateur footy player, you still have a coach. You still have access to people who come along and show you the ropes and tell you how to do things. There's a talent pathway often. So how do we? There's a vacuum there at the moment, and so at the moment we're filming a Zoom call to see if we can be part of the solution, because I think there's an appetite there for it now. Who's going to coach us? Who's going to just help, regardless of whether we make it or not? Who's going to help us be better?
And I think that comes back to what callers want to do as well. I mean, if I talk about from my experience, and I sort of refer to how has the broadcast landscape changed in the past 5 years, moving to Queensland from Victoria, it's given me an opportunity to call more AFL football and dabble into more sports. So since moving up in 2019, which was before COVID and after COVID, I've had more opportunities post-COVID to call a lot more levels of AFL. I've called national squash events. I've called national basketball events, national championships, seeing the future of the NBL on the courts up here, and I've called NBL 1. Those doors have really started to open now, and I've been very fortunate that with my involvement of being able to work as a freelancer with SEN to be a little bit more behind the scenes and work with some of the best callers in the country. I've been very fortunate enough, thanks to Joel Brooks, that I will, the work that he has done behind the scenes at SEN and gave me the opportunity to call 2 games of football. Ultimately, in the space of 2 years, I've called the premiers of one year and a grand finals of the other. So I'm pretty lucky about that. But I look at it where I am with my commentary space now and go, look, I know I'm at that certain level. So what can be done to sort of help boost that? Because that goes back to the one thing that I've spoken to a lot of streaming providers around the country, or those involved in sports, is they're getting asked the question of how come you're not streaming at this particular sporting event. So the way when we went into COVID, particularly up in Queensland, we only had a couple of months. Victoria, New South Wales, they had a lot of time, unfortunately, in lockdown. So their only main means of consuming sport was digitally. So now we're having more opportunities for more sport to be consumed digitally. So it's, as you say, it's opening up a lot more doors to be able to do all sorts of sports, multiple sports around the country at any given time.
The thing I'm finding tricky is helping, because most of the commentary is organised by the sporting bodies.
Correct.
So AFL Queensland organised the Aussie Rules commentary. Football Queensland organised the Premier League soccer commentary. The like the way I just squeezed in soccer and football there, just so I didn't exclude anyone. I'm very much a football man, but I thought someone's going to crucify me here if I don't specify. Anyway, and sometimes the people who do that, who organise that, it's either who have we got? Yeah, you'll do. And you can get little blocks. I'm finding that with one sport at the moment where they're happy with the people they've got. And I listen to them and go, no, I think the players deserve better. Mm-hmm. And sometimes trying to convince the decision makers that, no, actually, this is what good commentary sounds like. You can do better. Stop giving it to the old crusty blokes. Yeah. So there's a bit of education there as well about what they can reasonably expect and ask for. And also just to provide a bit of incentive for people who really want to be good, who say, no, I love this competition. I want to help improve it. Let me in the com box so that I can be part of this and help raise this part of the competition to the level that they're providing out on the field.
That's very insightful there. I think you've hit the nail on the head about the changing landscape. Another comparison that I wanted. I don't believe this is the correct comparison. I don't believe in it at all. But a lot of people
just say it and I'll tear it to pieces.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so a lot of people say that the AFLW in particular, and we're looking at that, is that they've chucked the full 18 teams in there, and the depth and the modelling at grassroots level from the bottom up hasn't quite matched. They've gone too hard too early. And I disagree with that. I believe what the AFLW has done is wonderful. As a sports fan, as an Essendon fan, I'm excited that I can have a team to get behind. But I think, when we revert back to the question, that the topic of today is how has the broadcast landscape changed in the past 5 years? I think it's changed too quickly to match the demands of it. I don't know that it's sort of like, okay, well, we've got some of the basic tools. Let's go out and stream something. But we talk about a financial model to make it sustainable going forward. You had the bare basics in mind. Now that we've got a lot more streaming services there, and I've had this conversation with different people across different sports around the country in terms of callers getting financially reimbursed for their time, and that's the reality. That's sometimes in this climate, if we want to, if we get an opportunity to earn money elsewhere instead of calling, then we're probably going to go and chase the dollar because the current circumstance that we're in. So I don't know. There hasn't been a lot of time to sort of sit down and build a solid financial model to go, okay, well, we're going to stream, where's the sport organisation? We're going to stream 5 matches, whether it be soccer or tennis, whatever it is. How are we going to sell this? Because virtually you've got a lot of screen time there. You've got this big screen, you've got this 16:9 format, people are watching on their phones, etc. You stick a couple of logos on there, you give the commentary team a bit of paper, you read out some, this is all thanks to blah, 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 blah. There's not that model that's been put in yet. And I think that in itself, with those sponsor mentions, can put money back into getting good equipment, but also keep callers going for longer. So that's where I think there's too many games. There's starting to become more callers, but if you had more money in the kitty to be able to pay for those callers, I think that's going to take time.
Probably 2 things there. Firstly is that the explosion in the number of games being streamed coincided with sporting organizations have to lay off staff members because when the pandemic came along, suddenly there was a lot less money around. And so, they were letting go of people they were already paying, never mind trying to get some money to people who were otherwise volunteers. So I think there was that element to it. Of course. The second one is that in order to put your hand out for money, you need to be generating money. Now, I'm not saying that as, I'm not coming across all right wing here. I'm not going anti-welfare. I'm talking specifically in terms of sports commentary. Yeah. But if you, you might bake some cakes and take them to the market and want to sell them. If they don't taste any good, then no one will buy them. You're not creating any money. So the fact that you've put a lot of time and effort into those cakes still doesn't mean you can sell them. Mm-hmm. And I think for a while there, the people who were commentating at sort of elite amateur level, for want of a better phrase, were just doing their best. They'd turn up with a team sheet and they'd say, "Oh, and the ball's gone back there, and that's Smith." I have no problem with those people coming along and volunteering because they're getting in there, they're having a go, they're filling a service, and they're certainly no better than the people who are running canteens or who are being first aid volunteers. And so sometimes I felt a bit guilty about commentators just putting their hand out for money simply because they turn up. Yep. What's starting to happen, and you and I have been part of this in AFL Queensland, and we are not unique in this regard, is that we've turned this, like, we are training as hard as the players. We are doing work during the week where we are finding out about players, we're calling in front of matches, and we've tried to bring it to a good standard. One thing, one of the assistant coaches in the competition said that when she asks her players to look at video footage of themselves, when there's commentary on there, twice as many of them do. And I thought, oh, that's something. That's if we're materially helping the clubs, then that justifies any claim we have to say, look, sporting body, we're actually providing something to you now, and something that sponsors might want to put their logo on instead of something where they go, can you just turn the sound off, please?
Yeah,
that'd be handy if we're not associated with the dribble that's coming out here. So I think there is an element of commentators have to earn the right to go from complete unpaid volunteer to let's give you a bit of petrol and Coke money.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's probably you're looking at the quantity v quality aspect of it too. Another key element that I sort of want to mention, again, reverting back to how has the broadcast landscape changed over the past 5 years, are we seeing more people across different sports consuming more sport on their phones, on their laptops, on their TV, as opposed to physically going there? Particularly in the southern states, or New South Wales, Victoria, those that were in lockdown for greater periods of time, are they used to consuming a lot more of live local sport at home or the comfort of somewhere else as opposed to physically being there?
I think it's an and situation where they still want to go down to their footy club and hang out and see their mates and all the rest of it. But if they've got a niece or nephew who's moved into state to play, they're the games that they watch. There are people, of course, like every now and then someone will be at a game where we're commentating and they say, I was listening to you on my phone here. And of course, we're usually on delay a few seconds. And so what they're doing is they're kind of using us as a replay where if they've missed something, but they hear our voice go up, they'll be like, oh, hang on, what did I miss? And they'll go back and see it.
We talked about the development over the last 5 years across the COVID times for streaming in sports across the country. We have seen one of those companies go down in recent times, which is unfortunate under the circumstances of that. We hope everyone is managing quite well through that. But over the next 5 years, where do you see the landscape of sports streaming happening? And you speak about that upper echelon of those trying to get to that top level. And will we see more sports being covered across all different levels, and could we even get to a time where we will see more platforms cover more mainstream sports at the top level?
Look, it's an interesting question, and I think there's always going to be sports that need covering. There's always going to be people lining up to stick a pair of headphones on and a microphone and talk over them. But just as in the radio world, finding good presenters relatively easy. Finding good producers, finding good techies is difficult. And I mean, the example of Clutch has said to me that it's getting difficult to get the right business model for running a company like that.
But that goes back to what I was saying before too about how the demand for more streaming of sport has gone up, but the business model to sort of back that up. And I was using the example, okay, well, money for callers and stuff like that, but getting more sponsors on board and not knowing the ins and outs of that. But you're right, the business model wasn't as successful, and I see that could potentially be a problem.
It's. I don't have a business mind to begin with, so I'm not sure whether they overreached, tried to do too much. Well, that's the same thing. But I'm not quite sure what that happened. I mean, what I hope doesn't happen is that it all goes to the people who are already the big media players. And of course, there's one company at the moment which is owned by the biggest media player of them all. And they are behind a paywall, but organizations are saying, yes, you can do it because there's money in it for them without them having to put in much effort. So once elite amateur sport gets put behind a paywall, I think you've kind of missed the point of why you're doing this in the first place. So it's and yeah, I don't think that a lot of work has been done. And I mean, you've been singing this song for 3 years, where you need someone in an organization who can speak to the local businesses or speak to existing sponsors and say, hey, look, for this little bit extra, we can, pummel your name in commentary. And I'll just redo that bit so you can cut out the phone call in a moment. I think there's not been enough work done with going around to local businesses and, or existing sponsors and saying, look, you already sponsor this competition for, this little bit extra a month. We can make sure that we plug your name in commentary, repeatedly. And I don't know whether that was one of the roles that went down with COVID, where people had to get rid of, sponsorship managers and things like that. But you're right, that seems to be the place. I mean, ultimately, because we're not actually making something that we can sell, we're just saying words, we end up being billboards for companies. The only way you avoid that is by going to the ABC, where it costs 8 cents a day for everyone to let you talk. Yeah. So actually, it's about 19.5 cents a day now, totally different issue. So, but yeah, that role, it seems to be one that a lot of people seem to know how to do, but the sporting organizations have possibly thought, okay, for us to build up to where we were pre-COVID, that's down the pecking order a bit.
I think we're talking about money. There's one thing that costs money, and that's not just the people, because you can have people stream and do all that sort of stuff, but it's the equipment. And the one thing I've experienced across the radio and TV streaming platforms is the most important thing that you have, it's sound. And you need to invest money into equipment that produces a good sound. Forget about the callers. Commentary is always the cherry topper. But if you've got a camera there and you've got an effects mic that can pick up the ambience of what's happening there, that people back home can feel it, what's going on, that's great. That's a good basis, but you still need money to go into that equipment, regardless of what you're doing. And once you get commentators on board, you still need good sound. And again, that comes at a cost.
Yeah. Thankfully, just getting that basic level can be a little bit easier to sell, because the same footage and sound is then used for judiciary footage and can also be used for coaching purposes. So that's something that I think clubs can get on board with a lot more, and organizations can get on board with a lot more. And as you're right, as you say, the putting a bit of commentary on top of that. Obviously, it's better if you've got live commentators at the ground, but you can even have someone like I've often thought, purely because I like the sound of my own voice, that I know you do too, that you can call one game live a week, and then in an 8-team comp, there's 3 other games. That'd be, for me, a very pleasant way to spend Sunday, is just laying commentary over the other 3 games. So there's. There are backups for that. Now, that's not a substitute for. I think when people go to studio commentary as a first resort, that's a problem. But to use it so that you can add a bit of icing onto the other games, that's easy.
Do you think that maybe, again, we're talking about this whole 5-year thing? We've spoken about the last 5 years, how it's evolved, and 5 years going forward. And I know people will be watching this; they'll have their own insights, which is wonderful, because we want to stimulate that sort of conversation. But maybe we see less money or less streaming services, less main companies taking all the big sports, and therefore we essentially have everything on cable. We have KO, for argument's sake, that's picking up a lot more sports at different levels. So you might pay your small subscription, but a subscription like KO, which I know it's tied to a bigger organization, but if you have other companies rival that, and you have that little paywall, but it absorbs and produces a lot more sport, do you think that might dictate how we consume sport going forward, as opposed to relying on the big heavy hitters?
Yeah, it's I mean, what I've found interesting with a lot of these companies coming through is that what you're supposed to get and what they're selling when they go to organizations is that sure, you might have someone who's been, who's done it as a hobby and you've paid them, or they might have a small business, but we're a bigger organization, and so we provide reliability and a bit of extra professionalism. And if I'm honest, the companies that have been promising that and then producing it have not been providing that. Often they're scrambling for people to do the work for them, to do the camera work, to do the tech work. Some of them are students. You often find a diamond in the rough. In fact, I think some of those people will go on to big careers. But to do the volume of sports and the volume of games that they've been trying to do, they have not provided better quality than a lot of the people who used to do it either as a side gig, or maybe they were people who did camera work during the week and the sports was a bit of a hustle on the side. And so I would like to see companies in that area, I'm determined not to say in that space because I hate that phrase, come along and maybe just think a little bit smaller to start with and say, okay, we're going to do one sport really well, or let's be slightly ambitious, 3 sports really well. We're going to establish ourselves there. We're going to make sure that our people are really good quality, and then from there it's like, oh, okay, we got more people wanting to join there of good quality as well. Now we'll do a 4th sport. Now we'll do a 5th sport. And so the overreach and the over ambition has been a problem. So in terms of number of sports cast, I think with things like the collapse of Clutch, it may reopen the door for some of these sort of hobbyists to come back in and say, okay, I'll do your comp, and I'll do it well, and I'll do it properly. And I think the issue of whether the big players start to dominate the community sport broadcasting sector will depend a bit on whether they want it and whether they see market value in it. And I'm not business savvy enough to know how they view that at the moment.
I think we just need more people to not only go to their local sport, but also to consume it when they're not there, consume other sports. I think we see 2 major problems at the moment. The supply and demand simply isn't on the same page. So the demand of sport doesn't match the supply of talent coming through. And to another point that you made earlier, is we're seeing a lot of freelance work. So in an economy where people are looking for full-time work, to simply freelance themselves out and have casual work, to do sports, which is mainly based on the weekend, I think that's going to become an issue as well. Unless a company can sit down and go, okay, well, we're going to do this sport really well, and we're going to employ a whole heap of people, and we're going to make sure that we do everything properly. Maybe expand on their skill set for those who do the camera work. Okay, we're going to get you to do some video editing during the week, play some highlights, do some social media, feed that out to other, to their respective leagues, and diversify their skill sets. Anything by any means to get them on the full-time payroll, because I just don't know that if you're not committed 100%, I think the product is going to suffer because of it.
Play-by-play callers generally, we tend to be obsessive. Mm-hmm. We want to know everything about everything. We want to do, really good job. We want to make sure that everyone knows everything about everything. Yeah. And it's like, hey, you want to know that story? And so it tends to be people who immerse themselves in it. In some competitions, you have people who are like that and who attach themselves to a competition and just want to do everything at as high a level as they can for that comp. With some other comps, what they do is they say, oh, we would like to have live streams of every game with commentary. Who are we going to get to commentate? And then you have someone who does it, and they might be good, they might be bad, but they tend to be just sort of doing it. They're not trying to, they're not passionate about it. It's not an expression of who they are and what they want to be. And at the risk of oversimplifying, they're the ones that tend to fall down because the organization thought, oh, we want this, and then someone's filled the gap, rather than, oh, hang on, we've got some people here who are passionate about it, and if we give them this opportunity, they're going to really run with it and make it work. And so I do wonder whether some organizations have wanted commentary, they've wanted live streaming and broadcast and all the rest of it, but they haven't actually had the people who are passionate about it to keep doing it and to keep doing it well. I should say as well, I mean, you quite rightly talk about supply and demand. This is what has happened with every single business and every single activity where people are trying to make money from it since the dawn of time. This is not a new economic story.
Yeah, exactly.
If you think about when the internet first came out, everyone's like, oh, gotta have a website, gotta have a website. Everyone got a website. The web soon became a graveyard for websites that people lost interest in after 2 months. Yeah, you could just see them everywhere. I think there's a bit of that sorting process happening now with a lot of community level sports broadcasting, where a lot of people are having a go at it. And some organizations, it will stay and become a feature and become a constant part of who they are as an organization. And with others, it'll be, oh, that didn't work.
My final word on that one is we're looking at the bright side for those who are interested in getting a sports commentary and looking to try and open doors. The market is simply there for it. I think the only thing that comes down to an issue is, for every camera that's out there at a swim meet, with water polo or tennis or soccer or anything like that, is have they got a headset? And the headsets, they come at a cost. But if you've got a headset that plugs into the camera, you don't necessarily need a mixer. You're off to the races. So there are opportunities there to call a wide range of sports for anyone that wants to throw their hat in the ring, which is very, very positive for broadcasters or aspiring broadcasters around the country to get experience.
And I think that's the thing, is that if for anyone around the world, really, but let's talk about Australia at the moment, if commentary is inside you, where if you're watching a sporting fixture and you get frustrated at the commentary and think, I could do a better job than that, there's a very good chance you can. And if your passion is Aussie rules, go to an Aussie Rules organization and say, look, I would like to commentate. What have you got? If they don't have anything, go to the next one. If your passion is water polo, go to your state water polo league and say, I would like to be involved in commentary. What do I have to do? Do you want me to do a show reel? Do you want me to just turn up and work with the guy? There will be an opportunity somewhere. So if you're just thinking, oh, these people need it, I might have a go. Well, maybe you will. Have a go. Maybe you'll find a hidden talent. But generally speaking, you already know if you want to be a commentator. You already know if you're the kind of person who almost can't stop yourself from commentating, and people are telling you to shut up at sporting events, just watch the game, you noisy moron. Then yeah, this is go find somewhere and put that passion to use, because you will improve, you will feel better, and you will find that people are grateful for your efforts, even while you're still learning your craft.
And what you said kind of applies to how I got to where I've been lucky enough to get, is that I purely asked the question of AFL Queensland, have you got any radio stations that do it? I want to listen. No, we've got a spot available to call. I know you mentioned you're calling. And then I would, if I didn't express the interest of I just want to listen in, I wouldn't have been able to call AFL football here in Queensland. That's the reality. Within 3 years of me calling my first QAFLW game, or making that phone call to the wonderful Joe over at AFL Queensland, I wouldn't have got the AFL gig. So it's just an expression of interest of I'm a fan of the sport. How can I consume it?
Yeah. So most doors want someone to knock on them.
Exactly. If you are a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We want to try and grow this. We've got lots of complex issues, complex educational tools, and I say educational loosely. It's more of a conversational forum about commentary. There's probably 20 to 30 topics that we could cover for hours on end per one. It's all about telling stories as well. I want to bring new people on to discuss their commentary journey, whether it's calling the local chess competition. If there was commentators out there, I'm pretty sure somebody would have done it, or water polo, or whatever it is. We want to open the door. Daniel, thanks so much for jumping on board for the very first edition of Play by Pod, and looking forward to seeing your career progress in extraordinary ways.
Look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for giving me yet another avenue to talk, and back at you with your career progression, Chris. Onward and upward.